Well, good evening and happy Tuesday to all of you. It is Tuesday, November 14th. I can't believe that the word November left my mouth, and the fact that it's the 14th day of November is just surprising to me. Of course, the live stream did not start on time because we're on Rob Standard Time. We're not on Eastern Standard Time or Central Time. We're on Rob Standard Time, which means that I am always late, but I am never late because I am always on time. Oh my gosh. So, folks, I have been inundated with doctors. Today is about doctors. Actually just left a firm dinner with two of my law partners, the managing partner and owner of the firm, and then a lovely Dr. Stacy Hoffman. And Dr. Stacy Hoffman is a clinical and forensic psychologist in Virginia who handles a lot of complex cases. So we were talking about some complex cases, and of course, the Maya coverage came up because she had no idea I had a YouTube channel, and then trying to explain both YouTube, the channel, the Maya case, and then the wormholes that exist off of that discussion amidst cocktails and beverages and food can lead to a later than expected departure from that dinner to this live stream. So I say all of that because I have a wonderful guest to speak with today, a guest that I was really curious about when first introduced to the jury in this particular case. The case, of course, being Kowalski versus Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital that resulted in a $211 million judgment in compensatory damages for the plaintiffs and a $50 million judgment of punitive damages against the hospital and in favor of the plaintiffs. And I say plaintiffs because it wasn't just one. This case isn't just about Maya. This case is about Maya, Jack Kowalski, her father, Kyle Kowalski, her younger brother, and the estate, the legacy of Beata Kowalski. And all of those plaintiffs received a victory in court that was more than just dollars. And I made a comment in passing. I made the comment to Scott from Recovery Addict, and I just made it behind the scenes to Dr. Joe, who I'm going to introduce you to in a moment, where this post-trial phase is a really unique perspective to be in. These litigants have lived with this trial for years. They have lived with the circumstances of what transpired and the litigation that brought us to a 12-week trial. They've known the behind the scenes, they've known the ins and outs, they've known what was allowed to be introduced as evidence and what was not allowed to be introduced as evidence. They've known all of it. They lived with it. So when the jury comes out with their verdict, I think relief is the wrong word. I've described it in the end of my divorce cases when I uh, have a client and we get the outcome. And when I address the client afterwards, I've described it that I see every single emotion at one time in their face. I don't know if there's a better way of describing it. It's a combination of grief, sadness, an element of satisfaction or joy, an element of relief. And I cannot imagine what the family is processing in this moment, but they had the emotional buildup to that moment. And we had part of that as the viewing public. But the post-trial aftermath, where we get to see some of the stuff that was not introduced, some of the behind the scenes tell-alls or just conversations, where there's a different level of emotion that the viewing public gets to experience in the aftermath that this family has experienced the whole time. It's a very unique place to be in. And I really have grown to appreciate that in some of the conversations that I've been privileged to have after the verdict was entered. Conversations with Jennifer Anderson behind the scenes, Dr. Joe Corcoran, upcoming conversations with other people involved. You learn so much more after the fact, and the emotional impact of the trial becomes so much more significant. So I say that because a certain individual from this trial realized that there were a lot of questions that were surfacing, and questions that I mean, I've tried to answer as a lawyer questions about the case, about the process, but there's questions about hospitals. What should be the right way? What's the wrong way? How do we know if it's the right way? What do we do? How do we fix the system? Does the system need to be fixed? How do we tell a good system from a bad system? And what can we advocate to those in public service who are responsible for laying the ground rules for this system? What do we tell them that we need as a body politic, as the public? And this particular individual happens to also be remarkably charismatic and have phenomenal hair to combine with my, I guess, phenomenal beard.
At 2, Rob, you're going to jump on the good hair stuff too? Really?
Dude, why not? I mean, I can't keep this thing in order.
Well, it's that one little strand over here that keeps going, right?
Which one? Oh my gosh, where is it? I can't see it. No. On court days, this thing is tamped down because I can't have that thing flying haywire when I'm in court. I can't have it. So oddly enough, we're already here. I'm already at the ADHD zone where I'm rabbit holing down some other thing. I had a judge in a moot court competition, which is just a competition in law school.
Right.
We argue in front of this panel of judges and their lawyers and their sitting judges, and we argue as law students, and we get to present a case. And I had one of the panel, and I argued in front of them, and all of them said you did phenomenal. They did. I'm not to pat myself on the back, but sure, I did great, except for the last one, who was a trial attorney. And the last one said, Mr. Morton, you did great. I love the arguments that you made, but I couldn't stop staring at the quarter inch that exists between the top of your collar, and your tie. And he made that, he did, but he made that point, and it's always stuck with me. It was basically this: when you're a lawyer, you're an advocate. You want the judge or the jury listening to every word coming out of your mouth. You don't want them distracted by anything you're wearing.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me obviously for over a decade.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Joe, welcome to the
So are you telling me that I need to button the button or what?
Oh no, sir. You are doing just fine. I intentionally set this stream for the evening so that the people could not see the glorious background of the Florida weather that you're in, although I know that it was raining today, but yeah. I set this background in the evening so that people couldn't get too envious.
Now, today was not a perfect Chamber of Commerce day, but you know what? It's better than my friends up in Rochester, so I'll take it.
So, Dr. Joe, who are you? I hate to say it that way. You know what? I'll ask it in a way that's more familiar to you.
Yeah,
Dr. Joe, if you would do the courtesy of advising the chat a little bit about your background experience and how you came to appear on this particular channel.
Well, I'm here because you were kind enough to invite me on. And full disclosure, Rob, I watched you. I watched some of your episodes, particularly at the end of the trial. I tried to stay agnostic and tried to stay isolated from everything until we were at the end of the trial. But my wife watched you. My friends watched you. My sister is a rabid follower of yours. She texted me today. So I shout out to my sister Eileen in Jupiter, Florida, who is a big fan of Law and Lumber. So now that I know that you have birthday greetings, I'll have you do that in July. But yeah, it's but so I'm here, Rob, because I had the great fortune of becoming involved in helping to fight for Maya, to take care of Maya. I found out about the case, back in February, March, through a mutual friend who introduced me to Greg. And when I had never heard of CRPS, I had never heard of Maya Kowalski, I had never heard of any of this taking place at Johns Hopkins, which is a hospital that my children have been to, not the inpatient hospital, but the clinic. And I will tell you that it's impossible, from my perspective, it was impossible to not feel empathy and sympathy for what this family had been through. And when I read the stories that were in the New Yorker and in USA Today, my response to the mutual friend that I have with Greg Anderson was, tell me how I can help. And it's I signed on as an advisor only. I never in my life wanted to be an expert witness, because expert witnesses all too often
End up
say
in
what they're
court,
paid to say. Well, no,
and
it's
they
not
end,
even,
yeah.
and it's not even ending up in court. It's just you hear the stuff that they say, and it's like, do you believe that? And so Greg did me a huge favor at the front end. And I asked him, the reason why I did this pro bono was because I did not want to be a paid opinion.
Yeah.
And by staying agnostic about the pay, then that allowed me to maintain my integrity, both prior to and during the trial. And there were cases, you saw it during the trial, but trust me, there were plenty of times prior to, as we were preparing, where I just couldn't go down that rabbit hole, or I couldn't take that statement to the next hyperbolic level, and that really allowed me to stay consistent and stay true to myself, which was important to me. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to do this, and I'm very happy that the testimony that I provided was helpful in landing this case where I believe that it deserved to land, and that was to take care of Maya.
Well, Dr. Joe, you gave me about 25 jumping off points in there, and I'm trying to filter through in my mind which avenue we want to pursue first. What was interesting was you mentioned that you were initially brought on as a consultant, right?
Correct.
So
Because
you were behind the wall of privilege for a time.
yeah, yeah, true. And but I felt like in my early conversations with Greg and then with Nick, I felt like they would benefit by understanding how the Byzantine architecture of hospital administration and management worked, right?
Perfect.
And yeah,
That's where I wanted to take you was, and I don't mean to cut you off. And if I do,
please.
that is partially the ADHD, but I when you're going down this road, you're
Yeah,
opening up an avenue that I really want to pursue. And
great.
I think I
Let's
told you
go.
this in our phone conversation. I It's hard to distance myself from the attorney in me
Uh-huh.
that says, "Let me navigate you." Like, and I apologize to the chat if it's part of the nature of the beast that I can't really tame all the time. You mentioned the navigation and trying to orient them. And what I saw was in some of the depositions that were played, some of them predated your involvement in the case. And you can tell there's a
Mm,
demarcation because in some of the depots that were played in the direct, they were referring to the risk management committee. And there was a
right.
lot of questions in the depositions about the risk management committee. And for the life of me, when this was happening, when it was being presented to the court, I'm listening to it, I'm saying they meet every 3 months. That's an
Right.
overarching strategy. There's no such thing as this committee that oversees daily function. And it was the committee aspect of it. And you came in and reoriented them to the right questions they needed to ask, right?
Correct. That is correct. Yeah. And that's actually the most glaring example of where I was able to help them get to the right questions and better answers. Because, again, as you correctly point out, the committee is largely a review process and an advisory group of folks that aren't involved in the day to day. Now, a good risk management committee should be getting regular updates from the risk management department, and apparently that was not happening, which was that leads to the conversation about, you know, the immediate jeopardy, the flawed infrastructure. But that committee was, you know, they really were about tracking and trending, and you heard both Perno and Napolitano talk about
Oh, Perno. Well,
that. Pretty stunning.
I
I'm very
I
busy,
don't
you
know
know,
that my jaw has stayed on the floor as long as it did during that
right?
testimony. And I can only imagine how you so did you see that? Were you present for that? That was before you jumped on.
I
You
attended
attended
that.
that?
Yes. Yeah.
What were you doing during that
I was, so it was a virtual Zoom based. I drove up to Jacksonville at my own expense. Stayed up there for a couple of nights because we had Perno on one day and Napolitano on the next, or vice versa. But I went up because I thought, you know, if you look at the organizational structure as it was in 2016 and 2017 when Maya was in the hospital, um, these were two of the most influential physicians in the structure. And if anybody should have been aware, it's these two. And when each of them said that they knew nothing about Maya Kowalski, they knew nothing about Beata's decision, they knew nothing about um, anything about this case until they read the USA Today article in preparation for their deposition. What that told me, Rob, is that there was no self-reflection,
no.
no self-assessment, no navel gazing ever took place about a case that, you know, to the end, they argued that they did everything right, but they never asked the question, could we have done anything better? And even if you do everything right and you
What?
get a good outcome, it's healthy to say, how could I have done better? That's why Tom Brady was so phenomenal for so many years, right? Was he was always taking his best and trying to raise it.
Well, and that's something really interesting that you raise, and to the point that Tilly M. Lope says, was that the risk assessment guy? Yes. One of the points that you raised about can we do something better? Did we do everything right? After trials, attorneys will look back on their cross-examination or their direct examination, and they will we're hypercritical of what we did or what we didn't
Yeah.
do, right? We missed a point. We left something on the table. We forgot to get this in, and we're hypercritical of it because it's that reflection moment of, did you do everything right? Debatable. Could you have done something better? Yes. And it's the focal point on, can you do something better? And if you stop doing that, if you walk away from your job and you stop asking those questions, I would kindly suggest that maybe you need a different job, because
Yeah.
it, especially if you're in patient care. Um, so, and that leads me to another point. I made the comment about Dr. Perno and his testimony. What was the most, I guess, jaw hit the floor moment that you had, whether in listening to the depots or in the trial testimony? Because the other thing I want to mention is, people might make comments about you observing or seeing outside information. Dr. Corcoran was a designated expert. Designated experts are not subject to the exclusionary rule. They're
Right.
allowed to observe. They're allowed to perceive what's happening in court and outside of court, because they're allowed to tailor their opinions based on information that's developing throughout the trial. So there's nothing impermissible about going outside of the courtroom. But I find it admirable that you tried to even refrain from doing that. That said, was there anything in court that you heard or out of court that was kind of your jaw-dropping moment where it was like, I cannot believe I just heard what I did?
I think that there were two and arguably three, and I already referenced one, and that was that neither Perno nor Napolitano had ever heard of this. And for them to be at their position of leadership, not only of the medical staff and the physicians who work at the hospital, but also the hospital administration itself. You know, Dr. Perno was the chief of staff, meaning he was elected by his peers to be their president, to be their leader. And he was in that role until the end of 2016. So he was in that role for all but a week shy of 3 months of Maya's hospitalization. Now, by the time that she finally was discharged, he had moved into a paid hospital role, which sounds like the VPMA, which VP, Vice President of Medical Affairs, which is the role that he's in today. Dr. Napolitano was the chair of pediatric medicine. And he had, at the time, 15 divisions, everyone from the emergency room to the
15.
intensivists to the hospitalists to, the rheumatologists. Those 15 divisions all reported to Dr. Napolitano's Department of Pediatric Medicine. So, and I argued this in one of my testimonies that he said it's not his job to initiate change, but I argued that it's exactly his job.
Who else? Exactly. Who else does?
If not you, then who? Right?
Who?
So, yeah. So those were jaw dropping for me. But what was really frightening were really two things. Number one, the blend of all of the text messages that so clearly documented in their own words that the focus was not what's best for the patient. The focus was on how do we catch her in the act, right? It was almost, and I'm not a lawyer, but it was almost like entrapment, right? Because if you remember Sally Smith's text message that said, she can't keep up the charade 24/7. She doesn't even know when she's making physiologic mistakes, right? If you look at the message about 3 or 4 messages down, it was a week later, and Dr. D's, I believe, was the one whose message said, can we do it again so that we can catch her before we have to go back to court? That's not advocating for patients. And then,
no, it's not.
And then the third jaw drop for me, Rob, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but the third jaw drop for me was in Dr. Perno's deposition, his absolute belief that a signed consent to treat, which was 6 lines of a 4-page document, because 2 of the 8 lines, the consent to treat is actually 8 lines of text. 2 of those 8 lines are specifically about you may be asked to do HIV testing, but you have the right to refuse it. So there's really 8 minus 2 is 6 lines of text. And his abject belief that was a blank check to do anything that I decree is in the medical plan of care.
His entire deposition, I could not fathom that was being stated under oath as a person in his position. And that deposition was remarkably selectively chosen by the plaintiffs, because you got to see you and I had a chat about this on, I believe, Sunday, where sometimes you can be too close to a case. You can be too close to something.
Yeah.
And you forget your role. Mm-hmm. You really do, because you have been in this system for long enough. You've done this for long enough. And it happens to almost everybody at some point in time in their career. As a lawyer, I've been too close to a case. I'm sure, Dr. Joe, as a doctor, as a young doctor, especially, you've probably been too close to a case.
For sure.
But there's usually an awakening moment, something that triggers where it's like you snap out of it and you realize you're too close, and you take a step back. There was nothing here that did that.
And no person who did. Well, I suspect that there were people who questioned, what are we doing here? I earnestly believe, and I say this, Rob, with no proof, but I say this having spent 35 years in healthcare and a lot of those years in hospitals. And 95+% of the people who work in hospitals are good people with good intent who want to do good work every
I'd
minute of every day. So
I'd put
there
it higher.
were
Yeah.
people, there were people who had it in their heads, but you heard it from Dr. Sowers, the interim CEO, his own words. There is a culture of retaliation and retribution. So speak up at your own risk. And there were in fact 5 members of the OR staff, 5 physicians assistants who were involved in the cardiac program, in the heart surgery program, who requested and were given a meeting with the head of pediatric surgery, so Napolitano's partner. And they said, the doctors aren't as good because you turned them all over. They're not thorough. They're not careful. They're not changing gloves. They're not regarding the sterile field. So they spoke up, but nothing ever happened, right? And there was information shared up the line from risk management to Jackie Crane, but there was no evidence that Jackie Crane ever pushed back and said, okay, you know what, you're right, let's do something about that. So I'm convinced that there were people who knew that they were outside the guardrails. But
Well, and part of the question there, you said it was pushed up to Jackie Crane. Part of the question there, and this is why I'm very cautious about anything that says systemic problems across an industry. I fundamentally don't believe that. I don't believe that. I know people in the medical profession, and I mean, I've seen lives saved by people who love their job
yep,
and go the extra mile.
yep,
And especially in context where there are removal proceedings that need to happen.
yeah,
This one is one where you have to wonder where the error was. Was the error lower down the chain? Was it that there was middle management that didn't have the, I guess, the avenues, the tunnels to report upward? Or was it that the people in upper management were too overwhelmed because they were covering too much territory? And when you look at J Hatch, you can see failures at every level.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that was the problem. You see failures in this particular hospital during this particular time. You see failures in the turnover and the burnout,
yeah.
and too many people that are just there for too short a time or moving between fields too quickly. And then there's middle management who's spread between 15 divisions and trying to manage a whole body of work. And then you have upper management who's handling how many complaints from those middle managers. What, doctor?
And Rob, to your
Oh,
point, when there's 15 divisions and you are in social work, you're in risk management, you're in case management, who's your boss?
who is
Right?
it?
Who are you supposed to keep happy? Right? And is the head of pediatric rheumatology or the head of pediatric hospital medicine, is that a customer or is that a boss? So you're right. There's that reporting structure. Those relationships are really kind of open to interpretation. And when you have somebody who is as strong a personality as Sally Smith or as strong a personality as a
Yeah,
Kathy Beatty,
that's the problem. Yep.
flex the muscles and, yeah. And,
And,
and
and
you know,
like
and then
out over your
part,
skis. You're out over your skis.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're just, listen, you know, my first job at a hospital, I pushed a broom and a mop. I worked in environmental services at Hialeah Hospital in South Florida, right? And my area was the lab. I used to have to clean the lab. And, and you're just trying to get through your day. You're just trying to get your work done on your shift, right? And so, you're just trying to keep the bosses happy. Bosses plural, right? I had a boss who was head of environmental services. He was a great gentleman. But I also had, the folks that were in the lab. I worked the evening shift right after school. And, Bob, the microbiologist, I had to make sure that his workspace was pristine, right? And his name was Bob, and he was a funny dude. He taught me a lot about microbiology because he knew I was pre-med. But, you end up having these micro bosses, if you will, and you're just trying to keep everybody happy and get your job done. right? Because you want to just keep your you want to keep your job.
You want to keep your job. Yeah.
Yeah. So um, yeah,
How,
this
how did you
this
go from
infrastructure
that?
was just. I'm sorry.
How did you go from that to literally running a hospital?
Well, I did that obstetrics and gynecology thing for a little while, and then had an injury,
Oh,
and
just a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
I
yeah,
delivered
delivered.
babies. I delivered babies.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I just delivered babies for a living.
Well, yeah. So I've delivered north of 3,000, probably close to 3,500 babies in my career.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
I figure that I have either performed or assisted north of 10,000 surgeries. So I loved what I did. I was incredibly blessed to do what I did. And then I went in for what should have been a routine back surgery for back pain, sciatica. Tried everything conservative. Finally, it was time for surgery. Orthopedically, this case turned out perfectly. My pain was gone by the next morning and I felt great. But about 2 weeks later, I knew something was wrong, finally convinced my doctor, and it took 4 tries to get a doctor to doctor. It took 4 tries to get him to order an MRI that showed a fist-sized abscess
Oh my
growing
gosh.
bacteria around the base of my spine, and of course, the spinal cord is the I-95 to the brain. So I ended up with meningitis and osteomyelitis,
Oh no.
and that was the beginning of the end for me. I
Well,
and yeah,
but it wasn't. But it wasn't. That's the part that I think is so cool about your story. It wasn't the end for you.
well,
Well,
it was the end of
no,
if at the in the moment it was the end for me. But listen, I've always valued resilience, right? It's not the punch; it's how you react, right? So
and that's so. How did you react? Because here's the thing: getting that news, and I say this because your backstory. We don't get to see this during the trial.
yeah,
I mean, you get to give a little glance at it, and I thought that Greg Anderson did a good job of personalizing you to the jury at the outset, and it led to some of my commentary, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he did a great job of personalizing you to the jury. My question is, I want to hear. So you are now told have now reached this understanding. I can no longer deliver children. I can no longer do what I felt I was. Can I speculate that that's what you felt like you were meant to do?
yeah, for sure. I mean, I committed my life to it. Um,
So how did you reorient, and where did you go from there?
well, I cried a lot. I considered self harm. Um, I um, I was pretty profoundly depressed, but I'm very, very fortunate that I'm from a big supportive family. Like I said, little sister Eileen, and there's 7 of us in the family, and we take care of one another. I married into an amazing family. We're Irish Catholic. We're pretty buttoned up. The Greeks are anything
You
but.
added Greek. You added Greek to the Irish Catholic.
Right.
You created the impenetrable force field of families. You said we're going to be Irish Catholic. Nah, I got one better. We're going to add Greek to the equation.
Yeah, it's like that coufferet, right? That that
Yeah.
that extra card. Yeah, but and Patty's family. And listen, when you marry a Greek, you marry the whole family. There's no question about it. If my big fat Greek wedding is a documentary. It is not an entertaining movie. It is a documentary. But it's her family is amazing, and they rallied around me and they helped me. And you know, Rob, I have some amazing friends, and interestingly, a lot of them showed up, and more interestingly, many did not. And so that kind of reshuffled things for me. But it
Well,
was it took a village.
when did so the village is there. Can I
Yeah,
ask? This might be a personal question, but when did you show up? Because at a certain point in time, you were no longer yourself. When did you show
yeah.
up?
It probably took It definitely took weeks. It may have taken months. All in, um, I was in the repair shop for about 2 years. At first, I had difficulty walking. Um, I had a lot of really, and there were a lot of parts of me were broken because you mess with the spine, you're messing with the nerves, and your walking is going to be different. Your sensation of pain is going to be different. Your bowel function is going to be different. I went through a lot, but I had enough of an insight that kind of helped me with perspective. I think it would have been different to go through it as a non-physician. I think it was an advantage to have that medical insight. But yeah, I showed up after a couple weeks to a couple months, and my parents were. My dad was the only one in his family to go to college. My mom, she took a couple of classes, but she never graduated. So they were not highly educated people, but they had a ton of common sense, and my dad enlisted with the Marines in World War II, and he lived by the credo: improvise, adapt, and overcome. Right? Life's going to throw you curveballs. Choke up on the bat. Right?
I say it all the time, Doc. You got to learn to hit the curve. If you don't learn to hit the curve, you're going to be behind.
Yeah.
You got to learn to hit the curve.
And I have to say, I could not have rebounded like I did without the unflinching support of my wife. She was phenomenal, because when I couldn't work, she was in the restaurant every flipping day working with her dad. And
you wouldn't happen to mean this wonderful, amazing human being
well,
at all. You're not talking about this person, are you? Because no, I didn't pull up the entire menu. Oh no, go back. Don't do that. I want to go back to the actual page. Refresh. See, that's what I told you, Doc. That's what I told you.
There you go.
Man,
I will talk with my nephew about that in the morning. He's the genius.
You got to yell at him about it. You got to yell at him about it. But
yeah,
so
and by the way, the scratch baked goods. That's what Patty is. That's what she brings to it. She is the baker in the family, and it's not high tech, but I will share with you that if you ever do come to the breakfast company, and I hope that I can host you one day.
I'll be there. I can all but guarantee it.
This is the maple bacon cinnamon roll. It's about the size of half a loaf of bread. It's magnificent.
Maple cinnamon roll breakfast company. There's got to be a picture of this thing somewhere. Oh my gosh, I want to eat that now.
And there's no calories in it. It's all made with love. There's no calories.
I'm sure. Yeah, because of course, no calories. Why not?
But that restaurant is that's actually not the restaurant that she was in at the time. She was working with her dad at their flagship restaurant called El Greco Cafe, which was right on Main Street in Sarasota. That restaurant, the Breakfast Company, which is the current, is actually a family effort. And Patty and her twin sister Terry and our nephew Dimitri, who is, by the way, a University of Miami graduate of law school. But I
won't hold that against him.
I know. But he's a brilliant kid and hardworking, and they're all hardworking. But the three of them started this in October of pandemic year 2020. Gosh, who does that, right? From a business perspective, I damn near choked when Patty told me that this is what they're doing. But it was a great opportunity to open up something that they'd always wanted to do. And when you're inside the restaurant, you really feel their dad's presence, because he was more than just the patriarch of the family. He influenced everything. He was an amazing man.
So family got you there. And I hear a beeping from my microwave, which is telling me a door is open. Can you lead us, while I go turn that off? Can you lead us down? You have now realized you can't do this. How do you end up in hospital administration? What the heck got you there?
Counselor, this is not where I thought the conversation was going, but I'm happy to.
Here's the thing. This is a lot of part that the chat they want to know. They want to know. They
Interesting.
want to, because a lot of it is who you are. Now, I will tell
Yeah.
you candidly, I'm drawn to your testimony not because of the testimony itself, but because of who's delivering it.
How so?
You ever watch something and find yourself watching it and not really fascinated about the topic, but the person who's talking about it is so impassioned about what they're talking about that you just can't help but look away? Like, you can't look away.
Mm, mm, yeah. Yeah.
You love what you do.
Yeah.
And that's the part about the testimony, I think, that's so unique that you gave. Now, I drew the connection when you first testified. I think I said that you were there to give comfort to the jury, that they could reach the decision that they needed to reach.
Right. I validated their feelings for them that
You
something
did.
isn't right here. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a reason why I said that, and I think I think the way you said it was you called me a ham sandwich, and I stand by that. I stand by that remark. I stand by that remark because at the time, we didn't know what you knew,
Yeah.
but we could tell it was important to you.
Yeah.
That part is something that's so impactful. People that are honest, people that,
Yeah.
you said it before, who don't have skin in the game. They don't have money to earn from it.
Yeah.
They're really there because I mean, forgive me for saying it, but they give a damn.
Yeah. Well, again, as I got into the case itself, it became apparent that there were some people in the hospital that did this family dirty, right? And you read it loud and clear in the text messages. And I know that the text messages aren't the sum total of the care. But when you read text messages that talk about, and keep in mind, they're talking about a 10-year-old girl. She
Yeah.
can't keep up the charade
Charade.
24/7.
Charade.
Can we do the test again so that we can catch her before we have to go back to court? That doesn't sound like a medical test. That sounds, and it's a legal term that I'm not qualified to parse, but it sounds a little bit like entrapment if I'm watching a TV show, right? Let's set up this test and trap them, oh, God forbid she's able to get to the commode, right? And one of the things that, but then the other text message about ketamine girl and talking about losing her mom and talking about she's let's hope she has a better life now, and I know we did the right thing, and for the life of me I can't figure out what was the right thing that you did that you're talking about right there, because
Yeah,
how is her life
exactly.
better?
What's the aim? What's the goal? What's the outcome?
Yeah.
What do you, and is that an outcome that you in your position was designed to achieve? Is that an
And
outcome that the legal process
yeah,
was supposed to achieve?
yeah.
And did you just step out of your position of being a treating physician and into the position of a judge or a lawyer?
So again, this was the 5%, right? That kind of played by a different set of rules. But here's where what I talked about was so important, in my opinion, was that the system wasn't set up to put an adult into that conversation, right? There was nobody to say, you want to rethink this? So for instance, what if they had, how much the hospital loves teams. They have their
Oh yeah.
medical team and their social work team, and honestly, as I was reading through it, it seemed like my dad was in the intelligence community, and it seemed like they set this up for, I kept thinking it's plausible deniability, right?
It's
The
so
team did it.
strange.
Well, who was head of the team? It depends on the week,
It
right?
was recommended by risk management. Risk management said it. Somebody else said it. It's
Right.
always someone else.
Right, right. And it's I was talking with Nick Whitney one day, and I said, it's like you can go that way, or you can go that way, or you can go that way, right? The scarecrow mentality, right? But what if the hospital, which by Kathy Beatty's testimony,
Give me one sec, Doc. Don't stop.
Yeah, help yourself. Kathy Beatty's testimony at the end of the trial talked about she and Sally Smith had worked on 300 or 400 cases together in 15 years. And so doing the math, that's between 20 and 27 cases per year for 15 years. And knowing that these cases aren't in and out of the hospital, there probably were very few weeks where there wasn't a patient in the hospital under DCF hold, okay, Department of Children and Families. So what if the hospital said, hey, we've got all these people managing all these patients. What if we were to set up a committee that would meet every week, and let's just review the 2, 3, 4, 5 cases that are in-house today. And let's bring in somebody who's non-medical, somebody who may be a board member, somebody who may be a mom or a dad, somebody who doesn't have experience with the child protective team,
and
somebody
for
who
the
doesn't
chat,
have a dog in the hunt.
Most hospitals have civilian community board
100%.
members. Most hospitals have about half of their board is dedicated to people who are no medical training. They're there for finance purposes. They're lawyers, they're administrators, they're people who are outside perspectives to try and make the hospital run. Exactly.
Yeah. And you know, I made liberal use of their willingness to serve. And I used to bring them in, and as did my chief nursing officer colleagues, we would bring them in to give us that outsider perspective, because you can get too close to it. But what if they'd had that kind of a panel that would put a fresh set of eyes in every week, and who didn't have the investment that, you know, Sally Smith worked for CPT. She was drawing every case that she was managing, she was getting
there
paid
was
for.
Additional money to pay for it, and they gave incentives for how much they brought in. As far as findings,
and, you know, and the Pinellas County numbers are like 3x the rest of the state, right? So, you know, that smells a little funny to me, right? So do you have your incentives aligned? And, you know, I am hopeful that there will be some self-reflection after this. I'm hopeful that somebody at the hospital, and I believe, you know, I don't know Alicia Shiltoff, the current CEO, but she came out of my hospital, and I know her background, and I'm hopeful that she will have the adult conversation about what could we have done better here, and how can we make sure that this doesn't happen. Here's a really painful irony, in my opinion, Rob. Johns Hopkins, 2001, Baltimore.
Yeah.
Right, the big house. They admitted
where I am in DC.
They admitted a toddler who was either 18 or 19 months old, named Josie King, Josie King, King. Josie King suffered burns at home, and she had second and third degree burns. They treated her burns, but while she was an inpatient, she was mismanaged, allowed to get dehydrated, and then was accidentally overdosed with pain meds. And Josie King died.
Oh my God.
Her mom, Sorrel King, was appropriately livid, wanted to sue the hell out of the hospital. And you know what the hospital did? They said, Mrs. King, we messed up. We made a mistake.
Do you know how far that goes? But
listen to this, Rob. This is the best part about it. So Sorrel King, you know, I'm sure she got some money. I'm sure that there was a settlement, but that didn't become the gist of their response. They committed to making sure that there was never another Josie King story in their hospital. And they became the joint for patient safety, right? There's a doctor named Peter Pronovost, and he was I think he was an internist. And Peter Pronovost was probably 37 years old at the time. And maybe he wasn't in the room, but they got him to head it up. Peter embraced this and made this his life mission to make Hopkins the safest hospital on the planet. You know what? He largely succeeded. So Hopkins created this whole new wave of patient safety. The scary thing for me is that in the Perno and Napolitano depositions, I had Greg ask, what quality and safety initiatives has Johns Hopkins brought to All Children's Hospital since they took over your hospital 5 years before Maya became a patient?
No.
Nothing. They both said
No.
nothing, right?
Well, that kills my
So,
closing argument.
well, here's Hopkins that has all this expertise, all this knowledge, and they didn't share any of it. As a parent in Sarasota County with 2 small kids, I was thrilled when I heard that Hopkins was taking over All Children's Hospital. My God, I've got the potential for world-class pediatric care less than an hour from my door for my 2 kids. But it was more of a branding exercise, Rob, than it was, we're going to make this hospital a great satellite of all of what makes Hopkins amazing. And Hopkins is an amazing hospital, but they didn't bring any of it. According to, and this is not me saying it. This is Napolitano and Perno. They didn't share a thing regarding quality or safety.
And that was the hard part, because you and I talked on Sunday about the punitive damages phase of the trial.
Yep.
And I think I told you, I said, if I had done that closing, I think I could have gotten the jury to deliver $1 or $2, because there was
if
a
you
way
were closing
there
for
was
the defense.
for the defense. If there was a
100%.
way, if there's a way to convey, but now that you tell me about Perno, I don't know that I could, because I would have had to tell. There's a way to take what Mr. Shapiro was trying to articulate. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to stand in his mind, but trying to articulate. And it was,
Thank you, juror one.
Well,
sorry.
You have told us, jury, you have told us that we are wrong. I accept that. I accept that. Don't go and say we think you might be wrong. Don't go and recharacterize what they told you. And I can't interview all of you. No, you have told us that we are wrong. I accept what you have said.
Yeah.
These are the things that we have done to our hospital. These are the dollars that we have spent. When you give punitive damages, punitives are supposed to force corrective action.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that from the hospital's perspective, after everything that transpired, we took that to heart and we pivoted. We completely reoriented how the hospital functions. I would have highlighted the damn town halls. I would have said the town hall meetings that you just heard. What you just heard was the hospital's efforts to acknowledge their failures and to pivot from them. I would have highlighted the town halls. I would have said we did everything that we could so that the hospital that stands before you today is not the hospital that existed back then. Yeah. So the need for punitive damages isn't there.
Yeah.
But
well, as I told this jury, I always expected my kids to own it when they did something wrong. And I always said my kids grew up in the Hannah Montana era, right? And Hannah Montana did a song, Everybody Makes Mistakes. So if I made a mistake, I broadcasted it to my kids because, I wanted them to know, Dad's a pretty good guy, tries to do the right thing, but I make mistakes, right? Mom makes mistakes, broadcasts it to the kids, lets them know that mistakes are okay. But there's 3 things. I did it. I'm sorry. How do I make it right? And, I literally used to make my kids say, I'm sorry, I did it. How can I make it right? It gave them that mentality. And had Hopkins and the defense team taken any ownership any any culpability. Um, you know, Number one, I think the outcome of the trial would have been different, but had they owned it in real time, I think we're looking at a very different family than the one that just won $250 million award.
Well, and that's the other part about this trial is the $250 million award. I hate to say it this way, that's nothing. That's numbers on a piece of paper. Right now, it's numbers on a piece of paper.
Yeah,
What it was being told that they weren't crazy, that they weren't wrong.
yeah,
And you worry. I made a comment to you before that one of the most difficult parts about this trial process was that Maya Kowalski's the inner sanctity of therapeutic treatment, both for Maya and Kyle and Jack, all three of them, the inner sanctity and protection of that therapeutic treatment was not given the privacy that it needed.
yeah,
So there was a suspension of proper therapy throughout the entire trial because they
yeah,
could depose every therapist.
yeah,
And you have to feel for those individuals as humans because they are still processing immense amounts of grief. Kyle,
mm,
not the highlight or focus of the trial.
mm,
And that's
yeah,
something that just exists. Just it's a fact. The
yeah,
case was largely Jack and it was largely Maya.
yeah,
Kyle got lost in a lot of that testimony, and my heart goes out to him.
yeah. I really related with Kyle. I only had brief conversations with him. He's a very kind young man. He's a very polite young man. He's a very quiet young man. And he's stoic. There were a lot of times when Jack was in tears and Maya was in tears, and you could see Kyle fighting the tears. He's a stoic young man. And, you know, I pray for Kyle at least as much, if not more than Maya and Jack, because, I was an angry young man. My dad and I had some fallouts when I was in high school. And, that's not a healthy place to be. And I worry more about Kyle because, Maya has the whole world to be there for her, right? Now that's a lot of pressure. 17 years old and being on with Chris Cuomo, and
It's a
they're on
lot.
Fox and Friends this Thursday morning in the 9 o'clock hour. That's a lot for anybody, let alone a 17-year-old, right? Jack, he's a grown up and he's a firefighter. He's a fire chief. He's run into burning buildings. He'll manage just fine. I really hope and pray that Kyle and Maya and Jack are able to resume the support that they need, that will keep them healthy. They have an opportunity to have an unbelievable life going forward, but there's a lot of hurt to still get over.
Well, and you mentioned to me a book before this stream. What was the book again?
Yeah. So the book was called The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. And Randy Pausch was a PhD, I believe, computer engineering professor at Carnegie Mellon, maybe the premier engineering school in the country. And Randy Pausch got a terrible diagnosis, and it was one of those diagnoses that, it's basically get your affairs in order. And so there's a tradition when you retire at Carnegie Mellon that you give a last lecture. And the last lecture can be whatever you want to talk about. And he used it as an opportunity to talk about life's priorities. And he was a remarkably accomplished gentleman. He was a young guy, he was in his 40s. But, he worked with NASA on the space program. He did all these really cool inventions. I mean, he was a genius. And it wasn't about that. It was about, dressing up his son's bedroom to look like the inside of a spaceship. It was about sleeping in on weekends, and it was just about, this is why we work so hard. But it's embracing it's hugging your family, right? But the reason why I brought the book up to you, Rob, is because there was a quote that has stuck with me for 15 plus years. Randy Pausch in the book talked about how his concern is his wife Jai, because he said everyone focuses on him because he's the one who has this horrible cancer. He's the one who has this death sentence. He's the one who has this, this horrible, horrible thing that he's looking at. And Jay's going through everything that he's going through, but doesn't have that support. And that's how I feel about Kyle. I want to make sure that everybody's praying for Kyle and that Kyle gets what he needs. Maya clearly will have challenges, and money's not going to fix it all. But it will give her access to some really talented people. That's good. Jack, I'm sure he still has a lot to process. But in the way I view things, Kyle is Jay. Kyle's the one who's going through everything that his sister is going through. I pray for him.
Like I said, Doc, after the postmortem, and I hate the word, the postmortem to these trials is when we who view this from the outside get to process the emotion that we didn't get to process when the trial was ongoing.
Yeah.
It's really insightful.
Yeah. Speaking of not being able to process,
Were you fading?
I know you spoke with Jen Anderson.
Yep.
And I suspect that she told you about what that interruption was towards the beginning of the trial when Greg and Hunter got called up to Judge Carroll's bench.
She and I got on a sideways conversation. We didn't make it to that point in the conversation. I missed that. I'm happy to listen to it from you. I know that I wasn't quite there on Scott's recap. He made me cry with the song, but I didn't quite get to that point. What occurred?
Yeah. Greg lost his mom in like the second week of the trial. Now, she was older, she was infirmed, and it wasn't a terrible surprise, but I will tell you, having lost my mom at 95, I was a freaking wreck. And how Greg was able to, again, resilience, how he was able to compartmentalize that and put up the battle that he waged for the next 8-9 weeks. I tell you, he's a remarkable guy. Super talented, super smart, super passionate. I think the world of Greg and of Nick. When Nick, in his closing, talked about that Pixar movie.
Oh my God!
Oh my God! I mean, I'm watching it on an iPad. Human. Now I'm crying. Oh my
every
God.
Human is crying. Every human is crying because honestly, what would you spend? I mean, I know for a fact there's not a dollar figure I'd spend. I mean, I'd spend any dollar figure to speak to my dad again. I'm sure you would too.
For sure.
Yeah. So it's like the impossible question, but it's one that you have to ask because of the circumstances of this trial.
Yeah.
But so that we avoid the waterworks, because like I said, Scott, recovery addict, is a terrible person. Not really. He's a phenomenal person. But I was driving home and I was listening to his stream, and all of a sudden the song that Maya wrote came on. I was like, damn, God, I have to be on a live stream in like 5 minutes.
Right.
But, oh God.
Yeah.
Like I said, emotional processing. But to
that put onions under my nose for sure.
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. And by terrible, I mean like wonderfully amazing. Emotionally, it drives it out of you.
And you were driving, so you didn't see. I actually saw that interview today when he played that, and there's a whole photo montage that goes with it. That even if you couldn't hear the song, you would see the pictures, and that would cause you to get misty. But together, forget about it.
Oh yeah.
And it shows, and honestly, Rob, it really brought home the tragedy of this whole story, right? I mean, this family is changed forever. I
Yep.
mean, you think about all the, I'm an old guy, and I still wish that my mom, my dad was around for, you know, all these events that are still taking place in my life. My kids, my son graduated from high school 6 months ago. Neither of my parents were there for it. My dad never met my wife. My dad would love my wife because he loved cinnamon rolls. He loved, and everybody who walks into this house feels like they're home. And that's because of her. It's not because of me. I'm like, get the hell out, right? Yeah, enough, go away, right? She makes everybody feel like this is your house too. And she got that from both her mom and her dad. But my dad would love my wife, and he'll never meet her, you know, and that makes me sad.
Did you happen to see that your son made the thumbnail?
I'm sorry. No,
Your son made the thumbnail, because I know that
no.
you were at Gainesville, bringing him to college. So
Yeah,
there's a Florida Gator in the background of the
I love
thumbnail
it. Thank you for
in
that.
reference to
Thank you
that.
for that.
So I like the person who throws together my thumbnails. I always give him little Easter eggs, and it's really cool when he
Oh,
does it.
that's
But
awesome.
um,
That's awesome. Well, my dog made a thumbnail from Megan Fox
oh, I
earlier
heard
today.
that. I heard that
Yeah.
the dog was not a fan of the insect, the mosquito guy.
No,
So
no, no. That was pretty funny.
what I wanted to pivot to was Greg Anderson, and this is kind of the last topic I want to go through before I open the chat to questions. If you're still okay with that, I think we got about 20
Yeah,
more
yeah,
minutes. Is
yeah.
that okay?
Yep, that
Okay.
works.
Greg Anderson.
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just got a text from my daughter, who I
Yes.
love more than anything.
Uh-huh.
She says, "Quote, Daddy, I'm feeling like chopped liver here. You're talking about the dog, my brother, mom and dad. Everybody's famous. I'm chopped
Oh
liver.
no.
So I want to give a shout out to my little girl. And honestly, she's the most creative kid I know. She's remarkable, but." What was she's always had a special place in my heart because she was 4 months old when I had my surgery and my injury.
Oh
And
wow.
she was the strength that I needed. She was the one who pulled me back into the game, as you said earlier. And I used her stroller as my walker, and walking her around the block was really what helped me regain my mobility. She's an amazing kid. So I love you, Caroline.
You see, Doc, I didn't mean I bring you down the emotional territory. And I told you I'd get you. I told you I would get you where I needed to get you. I told you to trust me, and I told you I'd get you there. Because these are the things. This is why, candidly speaking, this is why your testimony gets listened to with the impact that it does. This is why people care, because you care, because you give a
Yeah,
damn. Um,
I'm very
oh,
blessed. I'm very
yep.
blessed.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, I'm very blessed. Thank you.
So, what I wanted to get to, the last topic back on the trial issue, was Greg Anderson. And I know in retrospect, having spoken to Jen Anderson after the fact, that there were certain breadcrumbs that he was leaving throughout the trial. Breadcrumbs that went from ham sandwich to explosive testimony. And that was essentially your testimony on direct being brought in once, not just once on direct, but twice on direct, which is unusual in itself. It was like he was introducing you to the jury, i.e., that's why I stick by the question of the ham sandwich. You were introduced to the jury. You were meant to be brought in at that point in time to endear yourself to them so that they could get to know you. Which, in retrospect, freaking brilliant chess. Get the jury to listen to you, get the backstory, get the understanding, give them comfort with your testimony, and then bring you back indirect and answer some more pointed questions, but lay the groundwork for what the defense does when they bring on witness Anderson. Were
Yeah.
you in the courtroom when witness Anderson testified?
I was not. I was watching it on Scott's live stream.
What was your reaction when he testified? You knew.
You know,
You sneaky plaintiffs team.
So listen, I am not a lawyer, and I get frustrated by rules that don't make sense. Okay. And one of my arguments from the early days is that, hey, keep in mind that while Maya is falling through all the holes in the safety net, that was the same time that all these kids are getting hurt. And we know about this, but we can't talk about it. But it's completely surrounding Maya, and it's the same freaking broken system. I need to be able to talk about this.
Yeah, but how do you get it? Oh,
and that's why in the beginning, what I did was I talked about kind of the generic element of it, right?
Yeah.
And I talked about just like introducing the concept of quality assessment, quality assurance, and performance improvement, right? That's an odd term, but the jury understood what it was by the time we got around to talking about boom. Right.
But the mastery of it was that Greg Anderson knew that you could not testify to that. He knew that that would be objectionable because you can't take some broad, hospital bad and apply it generally without an actual connection. So Greg was like, here, I'm going to give you the 30,000-foot view. And I'm going to say it like once or twice. Here, I'm going to bring him back. I'm going to get a little closer. And then witness Anderson goes on, and I'm never going to get that image out of my head, Doc, of you just doing like this. That's going to be in my head. That's going to be in my head for a long time of just you sitting there.
I could not believe that, number one, the defense team did such a superficial job of prepping him, right? From what he's testified, he got a couple of pages of summaries. He got talking points, right? And from what he described, he was never given access to the records behind the talking points. And he said he was paid $5,600, and that's low from what I understand.
Very
it was $5,600 more than I charged, but
that's very low for an expert.
It's very low, but they spoon fed him, and that was a terrible thing it was terrible to put him in that position. And then for them to ask questions that opened up a discussion about the Joint Commission, I thought was tactically questionable. But then to double down on that and say, are there also federal agencies? I'm like, there's the mother lode right there, right? Because that opens up everything.
Yeah. You must have been chomping at the bit. I can't even imagine what you were feeling after you saw witness Anderson testify, knowing what you knew. And then here's the second question. How did you feel, because you were watching Recovery at Extreme, how did you feel when Judge Carroll laid into Hunter and said, it seems to me like you just put on a witness that implied to the jury that they have the blessing of the Joint Commission. And tell me why I shouldn't make one of your agents sit for a depo on Friday and then doing it.
So my question is actually, what were you thinking about the way that Hunter, the things that he inferred about Judge Carroll? I think Judge Carroll was very pro-defense in the beginning. I think he was very skeptical of the allegations that Greg and Nick put forward. And I think that as he started to see that, oh my gosh, this is actually documented, and I think that he started to like, wait a minute, I've been getting played. And I think that the moment you just talked about was him saying, I'm being played.
I'm done.
And then, but then Hunter's response, I mean, honestly, I thought he was going to end up in contempt. I thought he was going to spend time in the pokey. I was shocked that he was that direct to Judge Carroll. And God bless Judge Carroll. what do you call it? Judicial demeanor, judicial.
Demeanor, yeah, the
Yeah.
temperament, the demeanor, yeah,
Oh,
that
he was
remarkable,
spectacular, spectacular. I have
remarkable.
profound. I don't agree with all of his rulings. I do think
Correct.
that he should. I do think that he, from a legal standpoint, I don't know that there was any reason to hold out the videotape with the current CEO and the interim CEO saying we did everything right. But I
I can
understand
see
it
it.
from a 403. I can see it from
Yeah.
a
Okay.
prejudicial
So the
than
403,
probative,
you get the
right?
403 part,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 But still, oh my God, because that would have you know, you can ask juror number one, that would have put another zero on the punitive damages, which
Easily.
candidly then gets reduced at appeal, right?
Correct.
I think 50
Immediately.
million is incredibly defensible.
I
I
agree.
think it was a very smart number. But yeah, no, but how in the world Mr. Hunter got away with all of that? You know, let alone asking me about Dr. Smith's deposition that never got taken. I was like, can he
I
ask me that?
I have opinions about attorneys that are of a purely hypothetical breed of attorneys. Purely hypothetical
Hey,
breed of
you can, it's
attorneys.
just us. You can talk.
It's
Nobody's
just
listening.
us and 5,800 other people watching. Attorneys of a purely hypothetical breed that dance along the lines of what you can
Yeah,
and cannot do.
yeah,
And it's very difficult for me to explain this because when the chat was asking about the sanctions motion, they really wanted to know the answer. They really wanted that to be an answer that wasn't the one I gave them. And it's unfortunate that I have to do that. But the system is such that it is so hard to find an attorney and hold them in contempt because the basis is actual knowledge. Now, I think there's enough in the record that there was actual freaking knowledge, but then you have another issue to contend with on appeal. Then
yeah,
instead of
yeah.
fighting the fight, you're fighting the side fight.
Right, right.
Don't lose the forest through the trees.
Yeah,
You know, remember that your end goal is justice and getting there. And it's a decision you have to make in that moment. Had Nick Whitney and Greg Anderson pushed that, I think they could have gotten sanctions. And had they pushed it, they could have gotten the trial continued. They could have gotten a lot more than what they did,
yeah, yeah.
but at what cost?
Right,
And at some
right.
point in time, you have to do the balancing.
Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
I will agree with you that Judge Carroll, I saw in the very early stages of trial, he kept everything to a very tight leash, very
Yeah.
tight leash. As the trial goes on, he allowed the defense to lengthen that leash. It wasn't the
Mm-hmm,
plaintiffs. The
mm-hmm.
plaintiffs, he kept that tight leash. But if the defense was going to go down that road, he was going to let them kind of box themselves in the end, which is what they did. He was
Yeah,
going to give them a little more leash, a little more leash, a little more leash. And at the end of the day, I think that you're right. I think that there was a truly shocking moment when he came to realize that what was just elicited from that witness was perhaps materially misrepresenting
right.
the circumstances that existed,
Yeah,
which I, I I don't think I've ever seen that in a trial where at the very end, this chess move that was so, I mean, that's a high risk, high reward, and you have to lay a lot of groundwork to get there. You have to
yeah.
lay a lot of groundwork to get there. But he got there, and the
Mm-hmm,
last thing the jury heard was your testimony.
yeah,
That was the last thing they heard about
yeah.
how the errors were egregious and widespread.
Mm-hmm. And those are the Joint Commission's words, not mine, right? And you know, again, there's so much about this case that is just flat wrong. You don't.
Yeah.
I never felt like I needed to be hyperbolic. I never needed to embellish or exaggerate, right?
Mm-mm.
Which is, for better or for worse, I've seen that in expert witness testimony before. You know, where it's just so dramatic. It really spoke for itself. You know.
It did. And you earned additional credibility points when you talked about all of the things that the hospital has done. And that was credibility because it was kind of contrary to the position that was being advocated by the plaintiffs,
Yeah.
their narrative. And it was one that had Shapiro been listening would have cited more in his closing, but it was really that impacted me as a lawyer that's watching this going, oh, nope, not a hired gun. He's actually telling people that they have taken great steps since that
Yeah.
time to remedy themselves. He didn't have to do that. That was outside the scope of the question. He didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
He could
No,
have dodged it.
Miss Green was a very impressive. She, if that were a job interview, I would have offered her the job. Right? She was a very knowledgeable, very experienced leader, and I hope that they give her the proper support and wavelength. Yeah.
Speaking of proper support,
Yeah.
you had support throughout this trial in a very young now attorney,
right? Rock star on the rise.
How cool was that?
Your crush girl.
My favorite character. My favorite character throughout this entire trial. The person I was cheerleading for.
You're such a Samantha fanboy.
Oh,
For good reason.
absolutely. You know what? Nick Whitney, you step aside. Samantha Lawrence, you, Miss Lawrence. And yes, I hope that, yes, I'm completely aware that you are very happily married. I'm not speaking in that regard. I'm speaking to the fact that you're a young attorney who just got to experience one of the things that makes attorneys' careers. And I talked to you, Joe, about this on Sunday of, do you remember when you were a young doctor and when the little things that happened? How cool was that to see Miss Lawrence?
For me, it was walking into the nursery and my name was on the little pink, right? It would say lumber female, Dr. Corcoran. It was like, oh my God, I'm not a resident anymore. That one's mine.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. But Samantha had so many amazing milestones. It passes the bar, gets sworn in by Judge Carroll, gets to announce the appearances. Oh my God. And then the day that the judge came back and Nick and Greg were still up the hall, he says, well, it's on you, Miss Lawrence. She goes, I don't want the power.
One of my favorite was the trial. You don't and you don't see her in the clip, but she goes, I don't want the power, Judge. I don't want the power. Oh,
I told Samantha, and she really was my enabler. She was my handler. And she did an incredible job. If I needed a document, she had it to me. If I needed a reference, she got it for me. But I told her, I said, look, you've had the most amazing start to your litigation career. I said, don't be the girl that peaks in middle school. You have a really bright future. Don't stop here.
Advice, though. I mean, but what an opportunity to develop passion in young lawyers.
Yeah.
So cool.
And Judge Carroll really managed her really well. I mean, he recognized how special it was. I tell you, his judicial demeanor was spectacular. His judicial temperament was spectacular. He honestly, he's the kind of judge I would like to see at a higher level. I thought he did a great job.
I do too. And I know that people close to the plaintiffs were disagreeing with some of the rulings. I know people close to defense. The thing is, when you're mad at the rulings on both sides, the judge is doing a good job.
For sure. That's balls and strikes, right?
Yep.
And
all right. So I have some chat questions we're going to go through, and then I'll let you get rolling. So Jennifer D says, Dr. Goodhair, do you agree with the jury that there was medical negligence? Now, this is a specific question. You comfortable answering this one?
Yeah. So actually, I've not taken care of a patient for 20 years. I specifically, when I started working with Greg and Nick, I specified that I was not going to get involved in the medical liability aspects of it, because really that's, I'm still board certified. I'm still licensed. I still go through the process every year, but I don't take care of patients anymore, so that's not really where my strength is. So, Jennifer, I appreciate the question. That's really not. I'm not the right person to say.
Yep. So Matt comes in with the super chat. As a doctor with an unseen disability, I run into problems many of this community face. Even with evidence and knowledge on my side, I'm met with skepticism and mental diagnoses instead of compassion and honesty. They don't know. That's a
Yeah,
fair assessment. I think that
yeah,
that's kind of similar to a lot of experience. I
yeah,
learned so much from this trial from people who have these experiences that every trial is a new learning opportunity, right? Just like every
yeah,
experience in life. So I learned a ton through this trial.
yeah.
Matt has a question for you. As more and more of my patients are, quote, medically complex, end quote, there is no system support, no money in caring for complex patients, less
Right.
money for active listening and patient education. How can we change culture on treating, quote, complex, end quote, patients with compassion?
Yeah. And and I hate to say this, Matt, because my solution, how I solved it, because I'm a medically complex person as well. The way that I solved it is I actually pay an annual subscription fee to a concierge physician, and when I sit down with my doctor, I know that I've got him for a solid hour, and I realize that not everybody can afford that, and so I hate to sound like a one percenter, but I think that if we, and this is part of what I want to do with my YouTube channel and other avenues is really talk about what do we need to fix this. I want that to be part of my community's conversation, and but the I found an option that was available to me that helps me get over that medical complexity, which I acknowledge is a problem. I've always said that if I could go back and do it over, um, and start my obstetrics and gynecology practice all over, I would put more emphasis on running on time. I was that doctor that my patients were waiting an hour in the waiting room because I would sit there and talk to my medically complex patient until her problem was or her questions were answered, and I wasn't considering all of the people who were out in the waiting room, and that was wrong.
Yeah.
But I felt good about the way I was practicing. Now, as a patient who's been out in that waiting room, I realized that I wasn't looking at the big picture.
Well, Doc, that hit too close to home for me, being someone that, but I'm going to take those words. And I also I want to take this opportunity to do this. So you started a YouTube channel,
Yeah,
Dr. Joe Corcoran, CMO. Dr. Joe is the YouTube channel.
yeah.
It's pinned to the top. Now, Dr. Joe,
Thank you, Rob.
you just mentioned that you want to have a discussion. I'm gonna give you a little tip from someone who's
Yeah.
been on YouTube for a little over a year. There's this thing on your YouTube channel. It's called a community tab. And that community tab allows you to engage with your community. And right now, your community is at, let's see, let's refresh the page,
Oh my
4,860
God.
subscribers.
With no content. I promise I'll
Well,
put content on it.
there is, and there's 6,000 of you guys that are watching. If you're looking for how to get to that, the link to his YouTube channel is pinned to the top of the chat. Just hit that link and then hit subscribe, because I'm going to give Dr. Joe a little bit of a recommendation here. That community tab right there, that's your opportunity to engage with your community. And you can ask them candidly, and you'll be surprised in how many comments you get back. What questions do you guys have for me? What would
Where are you
you
talking about this tab?
So the tab, let me go to my channel and I'll show you where it is.
We can do this
Uh,
offline. I'm sorry to throw you off.
no, it's not a distraction at all. I
I am
actually am
such a
very
noob.
good
I am
at
such a
distractions.
noob.
That's fine. So here, so this is my YouTube channel. You see this little tab. So when you go in to create your YouTube channel, you can
Oh,
create
community.
various
There you go. Okay.
tabs.
Got it.
Community tab.
Okay.
And within that tab, you see that you can ask questions, do polls, quizzes,
Oh my gosh.
videos, images, etc. And you can publish that to your community and they can give information back to you. So for you, you've asked what voice you want to have,
Yeah.
what you want to do. create the community tab.
Yeah, thank you.
Give all the people here the opportunity to ask you these questions, and all of a sudden, it's not just a little bit of content you have, but now you're engaged in a discussion with your community.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Sherpa.
Oh, I'm not there. I'm not there at all. But what I do like is I do like genuine voices. I like people that. Oh, you're over 5,000 subscribers, by the way.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, world. Thank you, audience.
That's what that is. That's a reflection of the information that you're conveying, and the fact that people want to find it. They want to listen to it. They want to hear it because you care about it.
Yeah.
Keep talking. Don't stop talking.
You know what? I'm an old guy, but I still try to do better today than I did yesterday, right? There's a great quote from Ernest Hemingway. The greatest nobility is not being greater than your fellow man. Your greatest nobility is being greater than your former self, right? And I know I don't have that verbatim, but that's the idea, is that the greatest nobility is just self-improvement. And so, I do care, and I do try to do, I believe that we can be better. Healthcare does a pretty good job, but healthcare is important enough where pretty good isn't good enough. So, I'm hoping that we can have an out loud conversation, and, hopefully we can raise a loud enough voice that we actually get heard, and we can affect some change, even if it's just on a local level. So, Rob, thank you so much for introducing me to your audience. It's been an honor, and it's been a pleasure to have a conversation with a lawyer for once. I don't normally feel good about talking with lawyers, but thank you for that.
Hey, take it easy on us. Some of us go to law schools that are smaller in nature and have a chip on our shoulders, and we like to fight for little guys.
Well, I know that because we went to the same college for med school and law school.
Yeah, med school, and then Greg Anderson went to the same law school as I did. Things you learn.
Yeah, I know, right?
Tracy Collins has one question before you go, or two questions.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Goodhair. Two questions. What's it like being married to a twin?
Double trouble. It's no, everybody, truly, her family is amazing. And they are twins in so many aspects, but so completely different in others. But Terry has a heart as big as all outdoors, and yeah, I love it. I love it. It's a wonderful family to be a part of.
Yeah. And then two, what did post-trial evenings look like for Team Maya? Do you have any favorite / funny moments that you'll keep with you?
So I will tell you, and this is God's honest truth, I am having dinner with Greg on Thursday night. I have not seen him since the verdict came down, but I'm having dinner with him on Thursday night. I celebrated the verdict by getting my first 7.5 hours of sleep in a single night in months.
Totally fair. Totally
I'm
fair.
so boring, but God, it felt great.
Oh, it must have been amazing. It must have been amazing. Now, candidly, you were celebrating with Greg, and you were like, "Oh, I'll have a conversation." I was like, "I'd love to talk to Greg." He said, "Maybe not that night." I was like, well, you know what? With cocktails, I would absolutely love to be there, but no, I'm not sharing that with 6,000 people. Yeah.
No, we are having dinner Thursday night, and I'm super excited about it. I'm just so, listen, Greg and Jen, his wife, and their kids sacrificed a lot for this case. They, and I'll let Jen talk to you about the personal sacrifice, but it was, it would be jaw dropping for the audience to hear what they did to keep this alive. Because keep in mind, this was all funded by Anderson's.
Oh yeah, I mentioned that.
Yeah. So they've, and this is a 5-year. They filed this case in 2018, but they took on the case in 2017. Right. So it's really almost 6 years that they've been working on this. And for better or for worse, it sounds like the hospital is going to appeal, so it may go to 7 or 8 years. But they're amazing people, and Nick Whitney is spectacular. Great,
Oh,
great people.
I get to talk to him tomorrow. I'm really excited about that phone conversation.
I'm glad to hear you guys are getting together.
Final question, and I promise I'll
Yeah.
let you go. Standing up. I had the benefit of talking to you about this on Sunday, and I said, Doc, was I right? Was I right that you stood up? Because people say he has back pain. I get it. The standing up. Why'd you do it?
Let's just say it was to be polite, you know.
Polite.
Well, you always have to stand up when you shake somebody's hand, right? So
Correct.
let's
Yes.
just go
With
with
someone,
that. No,
we're going to go with it.
it was interesting because it was pointed out to me. I did not see your show after my direct in the plaintiff's case in chief, but it was told to me that you went a little crazy about, oh my God, Hunter's doing this to intimidate the witness, and a lot of judges don't allow that to happen. And
You can't just hover over them while they're reading the damn document.
well, and quite candidly, I had strayed outside the lines with my testimony enough, and part of my problem in that first appearance was I didn't know what I was doing to get a sustained objection, right? So I was trying to figure it all out. So I didn't stand up when he approached me in the first testimony in the case in chief. And then when you made a big deal about it, and my wife told me about it, I asked, "Am I allowed to stand up?" And Nick was like, "Well, hell yeah." And so
I love it.
but I thought it was just being polite, right?
It is. I'm going to meet you eye to eye. If you're going to ask me
Yeah.
questions that I don't want to answer, or you're going to try and put words in my mouth, I'm going to at
Yeah.
least look at you in the eye when you're doing that to me.
Well, first of all, I'm taller than he is, which was an advantage.
That's true.
And reality, Rob, like I said, I've delivered 3,000, 3,500 babies.
Yeah.
I've been in a lot of
Scare
very
you off.
small rooms with laboring women. If you've done that, it's not easy to be intimidated.
Imagine. Okay. All right, Doc. I'm gonna let you go. To the chat, I told Dr. Corcoran I was gonna have him for an hour, perhaps maybe an hour and a half, and I have stretched the limits of that generosity. If you do have questions, I will very much encourage you to please engage with Dr. Corcoran. He has shown on this live stream and others that he is more than willing to take your questions and engage with you in a community fashion and answer those questions and give you honest feedback from a person who showed remarkable honesty this evening.
Thank you.
Doctor, I really do appreciate you taking the time. It really means the world to me to have the opportunity to talk to you about this trial. And I thank you honestly from the bottom of my heart for coming on and allowing me to share that. Something that that conversation that we had privately, to share parts of that to so many others, because you have a lot to say and it's really important that they hear it.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the opportunity to meet your audience. I hope that we get to interact with your audience again. This has been life-changing for me. This whole experience of taking care of Maya has really been, I mean, I never saw this on my bingo card, I'll tell you. But, again, I feel like Patty's been through it with me, like Caroline's been with me through it, the Christian's been through it with me. Again, the things that I've been able to do in my life that are most meaningful were made possible by the people that are around me that love me, and I couldn't do it without them. So I just wanted to give them a shout out before I call it a night.
And it's the family that makes us who we are today, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But thank you very much, Rob. I really appreciate it, and thank you for all the encouragement that you've provided me.
Absolutely. Go out there, keep talking. Don't shut up.
I promise.
Keep talking.
I'm Irish. I talk a lot.
Can't wait. All right, we'll be in touch. Okay, thanks, Doc.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Good night.
See ya. Bye. Okay, I'm going to catch up on some of your super chats here as I see the doctor logging off in the green room. I'm sorry I couldn't pull up a lot of those questions. The thing is, when you get in the back and forth in the dialogue, it's really important that we were going to really cool places there, and I really did love it. What I am going to do is walk through these super chats real quick, do an outro, and then we're going to wrap for the evening. That was a very cool experience for me. One of the first times I've been able to do that on YouTube. So thank you guys for tuning in for that. It really did mean a lot. Uh, all of these messages I'm going to convey to Dr. Joe. I promise you. Because that's not the last time I'm going to talk to him. I really enjoyed chatting with him. Talia SC, Dr. Joe, thank you. As an L&D RNN for a decade, it was your testimony that gave me the push needed to go for my JD, ordering my LSAT prep book today. Yeah, amazing. And actually, one of the mods had a really good idea that I can save some of these questions. What a great idea. Ooh. I can save some of the questions and give them to Dr. Corcoran as a here's where to go with your first bit of content. I like this idea. This is a phenomenal idea. Okay, so I'm going to go through the comments, and some of the bigger questions I'll pull up, but then I'll say I'm going to save it. I'm going to ask him the question directly. Okay. And then I'm going to go back through and kind of rewatch and write those down and be able to convey those to Dr. Corcoran so that when he starts creating content, when he starts engaging with his community, that they're questions that he can use as a jumping off point. Love it. For the kids, Dr. Joe, when you met the lawyers, is that when they discovered the IJ? They knew about it beforehand. Also, do you know what Maya's reaction was to finding out about the IJ? I don't. And I don't know. He's been very cautious about saying what Maya did or didn't react to. I think he safeguards her appropriately, in my opinion. The girl Bonnie, Dr. C, did you or anyone ever actually lay eyes on the IJ? No. I know the answer to that question. The defense actually produced it. No, they did not. It's still out there. Why was it so elusive for anyone to get? Objection compound. The compound question all has kind of the same tenor to the answer. We don't know. That seems, and it sounds and it feels very wrong, but there was still a $211 million judgment and 50 million in punitives that came from that. So it does feel wrong, but there was, in this particular case, an outcome that was favorable to the plaintiffs. I do believe that there's probably going to be further investigation. I think this is not the end of the story. Nicola Graham, how frustrating it must have been to know about the IJ, but not be able to speak about it. We talked about that a bit. What was your OG testimony trying to drop breadcrumbs with we talked about this too, with the defense, hope the defense would open the door. Best witness ever. Thank you. That was probably one of my favorite reactions that Dr. C had. Like, excellent. Was it Simpsons where Miss Burns? Excellent. Yes. Breadcrumbs were laid out, and man, did he hammer that home. Aaron Hack, hospital administration here. Your explanation of quality assurance and performance improvement with the guardrails analogy was genius. You made the jury understand. Thank you. He was a pretty good witness. KC Cat, Dr. Joe, I've dealt with RSD and CRPS for 40 years and called a drama queen, faker, drug seeker, and mentally ill until diagnosed 4 years later with RSD/CRPS. There's now light on what so many have suffered with silently and gives hope. Thank you. KC Cat, what I can also almost guarantee you is that Dr. Corcoran, though he signed off, is listening, or a member of his family is, and is most certainly highlighting and relaying that information to him. And I will echo that as well. Crazy Cat Queen, question for Dr. C, retired Army family doctor, disabled, so no more clinicals. Thinking JM, healthcare regulation at FSU to help with what you're planning for future advocacy. Thoughts? Question mark. Crazy Cat Queen, this is one of those questions I'm going to save for later use. Laura Bronson, did Maya's team benefit, learn things of value from shows such as Law and Lumber? I am not going to speculate. It's not even speculation. I'm not going to talk shop. Not in that regard. But thank you for the comment, Laura Bronson. I think he might have alluded to it a little bit. And Frankowiak, question, how can hospitals with less money than rich hospitals ensure patient care and safety? This one I'm saving. My care quality is night and day difference when I'm in MD Anderson as opposed to a poorer rural hospital. Sad. I'm saving this question. And I'm going to send that to the doctor. Sealers with RSD, what do we do to be heard by doctors? Thank you, Dr. Joe. Saving that one as well. Laura Liani, Beata got justice, and Kyle, Maya, and Jack won on the eve of Poland's National Independence Day that celebrates the return of their country and the fall of communism. Interesting. The timing was epic. Thank you, Dr. Joe. Thank you, Laura Liani, for sharing that. J. Michael RN, many healthcare professionals have a major change in their past. For instance, I'm a nurse who was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 2 months after beginning as a nurse. It really enhanced their empathy. Wow. Personal experience guides who you are as a practitioner, as a person in society. So, the more people that we can put in positions with more experience, more life experience, the better off the service being granted is. J. Michael RN, I hope you're fighting that fight. I hope you're winning that fight. Beat the hell out of cancer. Kristen M96, do they ship outside of Florida for the chat? Might lose context there. Blessed in Texas. What do your former colleagues think about your testimony? Thanks, Dr. C, for going with Rob's questions about you. We can tell it's your experiences in life and your family's lives that make/made you. Saving that one as well. Angelia Taylor, Doctor, you were so honest and so impactful because you are genuine. We could tell that you genuinely did not agree with the systems. You are exactly where you need to be. We need more doctors like you. I tried to highlight that. Now, the doctor is a little bit... we don't like talking about, certain people don't like talking about how impactful they are. Dr. Joe, I trust, has heard from this community and from people around the world that his testimony had significant impact, not just in this trial, but in lives of a lot of people. Snazzy Trinkets Jewelry, Dr. Joe, your views on JHatch staff blaming Beata versus the prior doctors they believed to have prescribed too much medications. He alluded to that in the beginning. He did. So go back, watch the beginning of that stream. I think you'll see that he did comment on that. Cross Stitch 626. What a wonderful sentiment. So, Dr. Corcoran, to the extent you are watching this, and to Dr. Corcoran's family, which I think this is more importantly, hopefully they're still listening in. In prosperity, your friends know you. In adversity, you know your friends. I think that was my favorite part of this interview, was when did he re-enter? When did he come back? And hearing those little bits about him. It's not just the words we say. It's not just the observations we make. It's who we are and what creates the person that stands before you. It's a lot of mistakes. It's a lot of hardship. It's a lot of curveballs. But ultimately, we are who we are because of all of that adversity. And the people that show up when you need them, not when you ask for them, when you need them, really important in making you who you are. Wolf Rebel, as a former hospital administrator, what was your honest opinion of why the facility inspection that led to the IJ was never provided? I'll save that as well. Lynn 2574, Dr. Joe, do you have any advice on how we as a community can reduce medical bias against chronic pain patients? It's so widespread. I'm going to save that. The only Latina, why did Hunter want him to testify from the beginning? Why didn't Hunter want to testify from the beginning? Because of the nuclear bomb that Whitney dropped. Kind of, yes. Matt Bond, what advice would you give us CRPS sufferers who deal with hospitals just like this who won't treat us seriously? Matt, I'm saving that. That's an important question. That Johns Hopkins Hospital of 2001 is long gone. Pronovost left in 2018, was replaced by an MDJD. They only care about USNWR rankings. I worked in their quality department and was retaliated against. We can hope for a return to sanity, and hopefully this verdict will usher that in. Abby Rafi, my baby died 3. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. My baby died. I am very sorry for your loss. There's nothing worse in this world than a mother that has to go through that. 3 times heart attack from overdose, hospital lost medical records, 4 years legal battle, lawyer was paid off by the hospital insurance company. I'm sorry. I hope that this case brings a little bit of peace and accountability that you can see. Kathy, Dr. Joe, did you practice your testimony? I know for a fact that he didn't. Not the way that you're thinking. Villaray, what can we do to better educate the medical community about CRPS, ketamine, and stop the inordinate amount of misinformation? I'll save that for him as well. Chris Rodas, congrats, Dr. C, facing Hunter, both paragons of your field, arguably evenly matched. I envy your chance to face such an adversary. You outclassed him and Jay Hatch in every way. You showed us that goodness and honesty prevail. I think that sentiment is reflected. I reflect that. I can see that. Rather, I embrace that as being true. The Hopkins video about the Maya trial was with Kevin Sowers, bow tie, and he's the president of the entire JHHS enterprise. The system is corrupt. It's a sad place. Mary Coppola, and she was only 10 years old. She was indeed. Baby Gator, stop cutting onions, please. I did. Took me a minute. Feral Dragon, love to talk with you. I did have nurse mom factitious disorder and raised 3 kids with Ehlers-Danlos. We reached point of healing with respect to trauma, inform, and teach RASR youth. Feral Dragon, DM me and I'll try to get you in touch with him to try and get that question more thorough. AG, what was the biggest point you ever wished you wish you could have made, but were prevented either from the restrictions of the trial or from the council not asking the question? Ooh, that was a good one. Save that one. Misty Beard, doctor, what was your reaction when you saw the town hall videos for the first time? Were you as flabbergasted as the rest of us? I can tell you for a fact he was. I talked to him about that. He was pretty shocked. E. James, 1 out of 2. No questions today. Just wanted to recognize Rob for the fantastic work in covering this trial. I'm sure it was difficult at times since you practiced in the field and have seen difficult cases, I'm sure. It was interesting. 2 out of 2. And for donating items for Ian's fundraiser, you were tremendously generous both in educating us as law nerds and in helping out. Your selflessness is seen, appreciated, and recognized. I wasn't always this way. I learned, I grow, just like all of us. Nancy Kane, oh my God, I just went in and saw the song with the video, tears, and all along. I felt bad for this family, but it was always Kyle that I was drawn to. I sat and wondered, who is his support system? Dr. Joe has very sincere concerns for Kyle, and I do too. I have concerns for all of them. This outcome might feel like the end. It is not. There's a whole life that they all have to live, and they have to do that without the matriarch of their family. There is so much more beyond this. I really do hope and I pray that they don't shy away from counseling, from any therapeutic outlet. Maya, go back to writing songs. Kyle, my friend, it's okay. Come out of the shell. Talk to people. Talk to your therapist. Engage. I don't let this define you. Rise beyond it. Rise above it. Be you. Don't be this case. Be you. Lady Draconis, echoing a few questions to standing to receive documents. Was that a power move? Yeah, it was. By the way to be a boss on the stand. He was. Amy Ikes couldn't judge order sheriffs to get the Dracula file. Oh, God, I don't know about that. Sarika Kishore, the way to solve Matt's problem is to employ well-trained health coaches. We're trying that out in India. Interesting. Recoup health and orthopedic patients. What do you think, Dr. Joe? I'm going to save that. That's a good question. I wonder if many hospitals have taken that approach. Ryman YYC, hey, doc, have you looked at manufacturing quality management systems? The terminology you use is very familiar. Saving that one as well. Jenny Condry, thank you for the super sticker. Green-eyed Southern Girl. Dr. Joe, you're an inspiration. You ever watched the movie The Doctor? You remind me so much of a good doctor like he became. Integrity in spades. I agree. Momo WFH, can you tell Mr. Anderson we all apologize for telling him to watch the clock? No, he cannot. He cannot, because I know that was a message that was conveyed that the clock needs to be watched. No, he's not going to go report back that we apologize for telling him to watch the clock. No, we're not regretting that one. That was a good message. Here for the truth. Thanks for talking to us, Dr. Corcoran. I know that he appreciated that very much. AG, Ace, the first part of my contract training. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Transcription, here you come. As heck, anxious as heck about stage 2. Thanks again for your encouragement for the community. When are we getting another shop stream? I talked to Ian about whether he wants to do TOTC tomorrow. We have the slide deck pulled together, but I know that he's possibly hunting. Oh, this is great news, Doc. So Dr. Corcoran reports, please let your audience know I'll be with Scott, that's Recovery Addict, at 9:15 Eastern Standard Time tomorrow morning. So those questions I will try to screenshot and get to him before then, so he has something to kind of know what you guys are thinking about, but please check that out, okay? And I'll try to get those to Scott too. They're good questions. Very good questions. Shop stream, if there is no TOTC, I will be in the shop. I have a pen to give away to you guys. The only Tina, are we going to interview with Whitney that we can see? Probably not. Just candid. Kristen MI6, Rob, cinnamon rolls, big cinnamon rolls. They are really deliciously looking. Janet Condry, who provided doctors? It for the children. Okay. I don't understand the question. I'm sorry. V Takatsu, hope you have a great time talking to Mrs. Anderson. If you're going to live stream this, I'm all for it. Love this channel. Thank you for being here, and thank you for that. That's remarkably kind of you. Thank you, everyone. I truly feel the love. That's from Abby Rafi. And again, I'm sorry. No mother, no parent should ever have to go through that. 7 Aloha 7, Dr. Corcoran's story, Aria's backstory is both heartbreaking and so very poignant. And he obviously has deep compassion, made all the more pronounced by his suffering. I am all admiration. And the last one I'm going to save for the doctor, AZDCS Oversight Group. How can others check ratings and hospital standings? I will save those for Dr. Corcoran, and I will go ahead and make sure that he gets those. So to all of you who are here, thank you for tuning in. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate all of you. Okay, I'm getting a note. No, I'm going to go ahead and call it. No TOTC tomorrow night. We have the slide deck put together, but Ian is hunting. Wait, hang on. Let me check. Text messages. Text messages. I think Ian's hunting. I'm sorry, I don't have a firm answer up or down. I think he's hunting, but I'm going to go ahead and say that no TOTC. I will let you know as soon as I know. Promise you. So thank you guys for tuning in. Really do appreciate all of you being here. Thank you for being so kind and generous with your time to the doctor. Please go check out his channel. Please subscribe. He's a really great dude. I really like talking to him. And what he was saying about finding peace in making something, as his wife did, in making wonderful baked goods for all of us to eat. Go make something. You'll feel better. It will make your life better. I don't care whether it's writing something in a journal, drawing something, painting something, making something out of wood, leather, metal. I don't care what you do. Engage that part of your brain. The healing process involved in that is remarkable. So until next time, go make something. You'll feel better. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe on your way out. I hope you have a wonderful evening and enjoy the rest of your week. Good night, guys.